Hello and welcome to another Sunday service with the Atheist Reformation and Harry. How's it going, Harry?
Just doing good. I was, spending my day walking around, knocking on door to doors to hand out the good news.
When did you become a Jehovah's Witness?
No, this is about the special elections going on in Houston.
Oh, okay, okay. Hey, I had to question, man. I mean, you're already a theist. I'm trying to see if you'd lost what was left of your mind.
No, it's kind of interesting, but it's really a political conversation, so it has nothing to do with this show.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, you never know. We may bring stuff like that up here in the future. Actually, one of our stories tonight is going to talk about a little bit of politics here and there, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. All right, so do we want to start with? No, I think we'll save the article that you found for last.
I found an article.
Yeah, the one that you sent me right before we started this.
I thought I sent you a joke.
The thing that you sent me from Biola University.
Oh, that was not an article, is it? Okay, well, yeah, sure. We can talk with that. I thought, because last time we talked about we're going to figure out what Harry's view on apologetics is.
Well, I mean, you said that kind of talks about your views on apologetics. So we'll go through these first two stories pretty quickly. And
I really thought you were talking about the operation thing. I was like, that's no
from Babylon B. Oh, you know what? We can bring that up here.
Is that Babylon B or?
Yeah, that was Babylon B.
Didn't Babylon B get sued by someone for fake news?
I don't know.
Yeah, I heard they legitimately got sued by like CNN or something for being misleading and being fake news. It was like, what?
It's a parody site. That would be like suing World News Daily Report. That would be like trying to sue Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's obviously a joke. What the crap? But anyway.
He gets sued for being not the onion. Hashtag not the onion.
God. Wow. Okay. That was yikes. Let's see here. I'm going to bring that one up, though, just because it was hilarious. But yes, this is the article that Harry brought up from Babylon B. Talking about the new version of operations just has players using essential oils instead of performing a medical procedure. And yes, I find this hilarious. And you know what? Our new catchphrase of the day is an acronym. It's RHIB. It stands for remember, homeopathy is bullshit. And if you don't like it, throw a comment down and we'll talk about how you're wrong and that homeopathy is indeed bullshit.
In some cases, it is literally. There are areas where they use cow manure as medicine.
Yep. I know. To kind of illustrate why I find homeopathy so egregiously stupid, I suppose it would have to do with, the fact of just sheer mathematics. It, like the dilution rate, what's considered their version of the golden ratio for dilution rating on stuff is 30C. That means that it's been diluted to 100th of its volume in water 100 times, 30 times. To kind of put that in perspective, if you go through that whole process with what's considered the smallest dosage available, which is a drop, and as far as empiric measurement, it's considered 1/60th of a milliliter. If you were to take that 1/60th of a milliliter and put it through that entire process of 30C, the amount of water required, if you were to, say, put all that water together in a ball, the diameter of the ball would exceed a light year in diameter.
A light year?
A light year. No, I'm serious. Like I'll even pull it up for you. There was
How do you?
Hang on.
So you're saying one drop of whatever, and then you do 100 drops of water, and you have a solution, and you do that 30 times?
No, you do that 100 times, 30 times. Like it's.
Oh, I thought it was 100 times the volume, 30 times.
Yeah, no, 100 times the volume, 100 times, 30 times.
Why couldn't you just do?
Because that's just what they decided to do.
100 times the volume, 100 times, 30 times.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And that's assuming that everything's perfectly mixed too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I don't think I could mix it that well.
I know, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share this video with you, or this section of a video, because this explains it a lot faster than I can. All right, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
By a factor of 100, and that is then diluted by a factor of 100, and so on 30 times.
Okay.
Stated by Hahnemann. It means that the original ingredient is diluted by a factor of 100, and that is then diluted by a factor of 100, and so on 30 times. What does this mean in practical terms? If we start with the smallest drop size used in medicine today, 60 drops per milliliter, then one drop is 16.7 microliters. That's a drop of water 3.16 millimeters across. To dilute that to 30C levels in a single step, we'd put that 3 millimeter drop of water into 1.67 times 10 to the 52 cubic meters of water, which, as a sphere, is 316 quadrillion, 920 trillion, 288 billion, 377 million, 454,173 meters in diameter. Or, to put it another way, a sphere of water with a diameter of 33.5 light years. And for some reason, people think that a little sugar pill with a drop of this supposedly highly potent solution will cure them of anything. This poses the obvious question as to whether they believe a 30C dilution of pure batshit will treat them of their irrationality. The mechanism by which these dilutions are claimed to work is that of water memory.
Yeah. It's a lot of friggin' water.
Yeah. So you need 30 vials. And then you could basically have an infinite supply of snake oil.
Yeah, pretty much. And, back to our catchphrase of the week. Remember, homeopathy is bullshit. So yeah, so let's get into our actual articles of the day. I just wanted to go ahead and share that with you since, we were talking about it. And let's see. Yeah, we'll go with this one. This is an article that I found earlier today from The Guardian. This is talking about atheist politicians and whatnot. Although, in particular, I prefer non-religious. Why so few politicians ever actually come out as atheist. And this is a little older. This goes back to August 3rd. So this is back when people like Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard were still at least somewhat relevant to the Democratic convention.
Hey, Yang just got a spot at the debates.
What?
Yang just got his spot today on the debates.
Really? I thought he got booted for not having enough.
No,
he
snagged spot number 7.
Say what?
He snagged spot number 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is back when the others I mentioned were still relevant, and Andrew Yang was not quite clinging to relevance with a death grip like he's trying to desperately now.
You say that, and I'm sure that the entire Yang gang is out there upset with you.
Okay, the Yang gang can be upset with me.
Once they get their $1,000 a year, you'll
Yeah.
see what happens.
Oh yeah, totally. No. What I'll do is I'll sit there and once they realize that everything that Yang talks about with his freedom dividend makes absolutely no sense, I'm going to walk around with one of his math pins as I wear like some, I don't know, I might find a random Republican t-shirt to wear just to put that pin on just to piss people off. No, actually, you know what? No. Forget Republican, forget partisan politics on that one. I'm going to take the Andrew Yang math pin and I'm going to pin it to a t-shirt, whether I have to get it specially made or not, that has Milton Friedman on it.
I'm pretty sure that you could find that on Amazon, but it would probably like fade off in just a couple of days, and it would just say like, I don't know, Mill Fred.
No one would get it, but it would still be funny, I think.
I would get it, and I would give you a huzzah.
Okay. Not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but hey, I'll take it this time. So, the 2020 presidential election has produced the most diverse field of candidates in history. Women, people of color, openly gay man. That's Pete Buttigieg, right?
Yep.
Okay. I haven't really paid attention.
You haven't paid attention to the Democrats, the election, or Pete Buttigieg?
Yes.
I mean,
it's been kind of a back burner for me just because I've got more immediately pressing matters going on in my life.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. What with school, work, and the move coming up and all that fun stuff, and working on this local election that I've been doing here. So, I've had other more pressing matters.
I have a cat that sometimes needs to be fed.
Really? So do I.
Yeah. That's about all I got going on.
Yeah, I fed her earlier. That's probably why she's quiet today. Billionaires, socialists, and a self-help guru. Who's the self-help guru?
That would have been Marianne Williamson.
Oh, another person, another irrelevant individual. Got it.
Marianne Williamson is irrelevant. She talked like Yoda, and the Republicans loved listening to her nonsense.
Oh, okay. Billionaires, that's quite obviously Tom Steyer.
And Bernie.
Oh, Bernie managed to fail his way to $1 billion now?
I think he's. I
mean,
yeah,
wait, did I say that out loud? Oh no, the Bernie bros are coming. Oh, quick, I'll walk away at a reasonable pace. And then
show,
what?
Right? This is supposed to be your non-political show.
It is non-political, but there are always a few things that just kind of go hand in hand. Like I'm not a typical atheist. I'm not a Democrat. I don't even consider myself a Republican. I don't really consider myself a member of any political party. I'm just Drew.
Have you voted in a primary?
No.
Then in the state of Texas, you are just Drew.
Yeah, I have never voted in a primary. I've never registered with any with any political party, and I don't really intend to, because there's never going to be a party that actually represents the things that I'm for. Multiple parties are going to represent aspects that I believe in, but I highly doubt that there will ever be a party that represents everything that I would want represented. Like, for instance, I want evolution taught in schools. A lot of Republicans don't like that. I want less restrictions on the Second Amendment. A lot of Democrats don't like that. I want marijuana legalized, not even for my own use, but because I think it's pointlessly criminalized for no reason, other than the fact that they haven't figured out a good way to tax it yet. A lot of Republicans don't like that.
Are you okay with different schools basically deciding for themselves if they're going to teach evolution or not?
No.
Or government mandated what the curriculum is going to be? Because you can't really have it both ways. It's either one or
no.
the other.
You can't have it both ways. I'm for allowing a private school that receives no federal funding or no public money to teach whatever they want to teach. I'm fine with them doing that. But if you're receiving public funding, then they need to be taught based on what is considered mainstream accepted science.
And who makes the decision on the curriculum, the federal government or the state government?
I would say it should be neither. I think that should be something that's decided possibly by the National Academy of Sciences. I think they should have some actual input as to the curriculum.
But who mandates the curriculum?
It would be the state, which is what they do now.
But then it wouldn't be the same, because some states could agree to it and some states could reject it if it was mandated on the state level.
Really, what I'm concerned about is Texas, personally, because that's where I live. This is where my children go to school, and I want them to receive the best possible education and the most accurate education that they can possibly receive. And having a hamstrung science education is not something I want for my children. But, looking at it on a national stage, we have a Department of Education. They have regulation. What?
The Department of Education has nothing to do with curriculums.
I know. And that's one thing that I'm kind of iffy about, is I really don't want them involved in curriculum. And that's why I think it should be left to the states, and then other states will hang themselves in the process.
So you're okay with your desire for evolution education to result in survival of the fittest? Am I understanding you correctly?
That's right, Harry.
sounds like you're a libertarian.
For the most part, yeah. I just consider myself a chaotic moderate.
Chaotic moderate. Legalize guns, but ban knives.
No, are you kidding? Legalize guns, but ban cars.
Hey, that's my platform.
I mean,
Outlaw heart attacks.
Sure, why not? I mean, hell, there's at least a couple of states in this country that it's illegal to kill yourself. I mean, what are they going to do? Handcuff your corpse?
Or do they, like, if you fail, do they make you have to pay your medical bills?
Possibly.
Do they nullify your will? They're like, if you die, the government gets everything and your family cries.
I don't know. It's a whole lot of dumb. And it's like in Utah, you can't fish for trout in the salt lakes from the back of a giraffe.
Have you ever tried fishing from a giraffe?
No. Why would I?
Well, it's a good thing there's a law prohibiting you from doing it.
Bank fishing or pier fishing is usually what I do.
Listen, Drew, if you don't want to do it, then what's it matter if there's a law for it? If the law wouldn't apply to you anyway. If you don't want to own a grenade launcher, then what's it matter if they're banned? You wouldn't want to own one anyway.
Are you kidding me? I think it'd be awesome to own a grenade launcher.
I kind of do too.
I mean, think of all the applications for that. Like, I could do some awesome shit with that for 4th of July.
I'm going to take your word on it because I don't see how this could end with anyone not getting sent to the hospital. Although I'm completely okay with people owning them, I don't see a full purpose.
Like a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. Okay, most fireworks displays technically are grenade launchers to a certain extent. Like your large displays, some of them use a 37 millimeter. And that's just the diameter of the tube. Their priming charge is usually electric, but they used to be done with like 38 special primers. When I worked TDCJ, all of our less than lethal stuff was a 37 millimeter grenade launcher that used a 38 special primer. Everything from the explosive blast CS powder to the hornet's nest. That one was cool. You know what the hornet's nest is, right? No?
Nope.
Okay, so the hornet's nest is basically, think about taking a sting ball grenade, all the rubber balls from it, coating them in oleocapsicum resin, pepper spray, and then stuff it in a big shotgun.
Mm.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound lovely at all.
With an empty, you can cover an entire day room with one of those.
Mm.
And what it is it's 64. It's either 40 or 60. I can't remember exactly. Basically half-inch or 50 caliber rubber balls. And the trick with it is they're designed to bounce all over the place and get pepper spray everywhere. And you just point it at the ground about 10, 20 feet in front of you, squeeze the trigger, and there away it goes. It hits the ground, bounces up, and if there's a day room that's jumping off and starting a riot, that will shut it down quick.
Hmm.
And then there's also the pepper fogger, or what we referred to as the leaf blower of doom. And that's essentially what it is. It's a leaf blower with two tanks, one for fuel and one for fluid, either CS fluid or pepper spray. And instead of a plastic tube like what's on most leaf blowers, it's metal, and it has a heating element wrapped around it. And you let it warm up for a bit and gauge the wind. It's designed to cover a recreational yard, a rec yard. And you let loose with it, and just this billowing cloud just starts coming out of it. It's it had a bunch of different names. Most the technical term was pepper fogger. For others, it was the leaf blower of doom. The other one, it was the fog machine of sadness. I mean, all sorts of stuff. But anyway, going back through all this, we see that they talked to Jared Huffman in particular because he's a Democrat that represents California's 2nd district and is one of the leading proponents of impeaching Donald Trump, but he is publicly outed as an atheist. Though he claims that he's a humanist, not an atheist, characterized himself as non-religious, humanist, spiritual, albeit without any particular dogma. He's a spiritual drifter or seeker. This is one.
Your champion.
Say what?
This is your champion.
No, he's not. No, he's not. He's a wishy-washy little putz that can't own up to what he is because he doesn't understand, or he doesn't care to understand. He's an atheist. Like everything that he says, he's an atheist. He talks about not desiring to emulate militants such as Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens. Atheism seems to bring with it the notion of being anti-religion as opposed to non-religious. He prefers non-religious because I just want everyone to make their own religious choices. Okay, so that's where he screws up.
He's a spiritualist.
He's an atheist. But what he's not, and what he's mischaracterizing as atheist, people like Chris Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, they were anti-theists. They were atheists, but where they make their bread and butter is that they are anti-theists. They are vehemently anti-religion.
That is an accurate description of the difference. There's an atheist, which is without religion. There's an anti-theist who aggressively attacks theism.
Exactly. So and I think that's one of the big issues is that people think that, and in all honesty, a lot of it has to do with not conservative, but a lot of them are Christians, but it's the United States, so of course the majority are going to be Christian. Theistic YouTubers and public figures who talk about the leaders of atheism, like they talk about Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, John Loftus, and people like that. These men are not leaders of atheism. They're famous atheists. That's it.
Well, definitely not Hitchens.
Well, no, he's dead.
May he rest in peace.
He's dead. He wouldn't care. If he was alive, he wouldn't care.
You're right. I make it it's a personal thing that I do not like when people speak ill of the dead because they're not able to defend themselves.
I'm not speaking ill of him. I think Christopher Hitchens was awesome. I mean, I firmly agree with what's become widely recognized as Hitchens' razor when it comes to methods of argumentation. That which is presented without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's one thing that he was part and parcel known for. That's one of the reasons why he pissed off Frank Turek so much.
Who?
Frank Turek is a New Jersey, or he's from New Jersey, pastor and theist who wrote a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist."
Oh yeah, that book.
Yeah, I mean, or better known by or better known by its unofficial title, completely missing the mark on what atheism actually is.
Well, the whole title is an allusion to an old evangelical Christian joke. It was never meant to be a serious thing.
Yeah, he was quoting a comedian.
Yeah, Mark Lowry, I think.
Yeah, but he took it seriously because Frank Turek's an idiot, as far as that goes. But there again, we find in a lot of ways, and George Carlin was a great example of this, is that a lot of times some of your hardcore Christians don't really get jokes.
Well, there's a lot of people all around the world that don't get jokes.
True.
We were talking earlier about a certain group of people that are often in the atheist camp that kind of annoys you that there's a cross association with them because they typically don't have a sense of humor.
Oh, you mean social justice warriors?
Sure, we'll go with that. I don't want to be doxxed.
If they dox me, I don't really care.
Well, I'm just saying that I never said it. I mean, you might have said it. I didn't say it.
No, well, and I'm not even going to say it's all social justice warriors. I mean, I'm not even completely anti-SJW on every single thing. Like,
and I'm not either. And if I was, my name would be Mike Richardson, and I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. If you're watching, if I was going to say anything negative about them, that's who I would be.
And watch there actually be someone out there, and now you've just inadvertently gotten some random schmo doxed because you're being an idiot.
Maybe.
But no,
like the bottom. Any similarities with people in real life is purely coincidental.
Yeah. The big issues that I have with some of the SJW stuff has to do with being fanatical or being an extremist about a lot of things. Like, for instance, not everything is racist. Even though you want to say it is. Not everything is racist. Sorry. It's just not.
Well,
just because you're a particular ethnicity doesn't make you a racist.
Here's the thing about that, and here's where the problem comes in. If you reduce anything to a particular lens, then everything falls onto a spectrum within that lens.
True. So, the minute you start like demanding things be done or other people be excluded because of a genetic difference they have no control over, congratulations, you're the racist.
Right. But what I'm describing is when you look at things in terms of a scholastic worldview and you have different fields of study, and you narrow down your field of study to how you're defining the world that you're looking at, you will always be able to justify certain actions as either being for or against that worldview because that's the paradigm you're looking at it. You're not.
The rest of us call that myopic, and that's not a good thing.
It is not, and that is the problem.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Find a better way to justify your gender studies degree. That's all I gotta say. But as far as the rest of this article goes, it goes through talking about a Gallup poll, willingness to vote for presidential candidates from certain groups, and other things. Although, hey, bottom of the table came atheists, followed by the one thing considered even worse, socialist. So, you know what? Atheists will get voted for more than socialists. So, I take that as a win. Run as an atheist, and the campaign slogan will be, "Hey, at least I'm not a socialist."
That's probably more votes.
Say
But
what?
there is a question in conservative thought between atheism and socialism, because it just so happens that many of the countries that have pushed towards socialism as their defining characteristic had been also violently anti-religion.
One, China. China.
And North Korea.
North
and
Korea, which to me falls under China, in all honesty, because that's who.
and Russia.
Nope. Russia was Eastern Orthodox.
The people
Russian Orthodoxy.
But was Lenin?
Lenin was an atheist. Stalin was not.
Okay.
Stalin brought back Stalin beefed up Russian Orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm. But we're talking about the beginning of like whenever it was defined and the classical thought of it.
No, Russian Orthodoxy was still had a lot of political power in post October Revolution or September Revolution. I can't even remember what friggin' month it was supposed to be based off of. Post 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, Russian Orthodoxy still had a decent amount of political power, and they maintained it. It didn't start waning until the end of the Lenin years, right before Stalin edged out Trotsky.
Well, my Russian history is not the best, so I will defer to you.
Yeah, and then of course,
you would be surprising how many times I've had to just concede an argument because of my lack of knowledge of early 20th century Russian history. Maybe I need to beef up on that.
Maybe you should. I'm still wondering how many people are you talking to where early 20th century Russian history becomes an important thing?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. It happens more than you would.
I don't know. I mean, this is like the first time I've heard it brought up in any of our conversations, at least on air.
Yeah.
I mean, so there again, it's only a sample size of about a dozen now at this point. Not quite representative of a good sample there.
Okay, but so China, North Korea, you're going to call North Korea an extension of China?
Yeah, kind of.
Well,
they're going to get mad at me, I'm sure. But, I mean...
Watch the show because you won't be blocked, apparently.
Say what?
I said, well, make sure you tell North Korea that whenever they somehow are able to watch the show because YouTube stops getting blocked there.
Yeah, I know, right? Well,
what about...
the Chinese... The Chinese government was instrumental in setting up a communist regime in what's now the DPRK.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'll give that to you, but it's been.
I mean, it's been a long time. They're their own country and all that jazz. Yeah, I get that, but when I say I consider them an extension of China, I mean that's their form of socialism. To me, is an extension of Chinese socialism because it was the Mao Zedong style of state level socialism, of essentially worshiping your leader as a friggin' deity. with Kim Jong Il and then Kim Jong Un now. So
What about Cambodia and Pol Pot?
Cambodia and Pol Pot.
Yeah.
I thought
Che,
Pol Pot was religious,
no, he wasn't.
and I don't remember Che Guevara being non-religious. Che Guevara was a Catholic, I thought.
Nah, I'm pretty sure he wasn't.
I don't know. I mean, I know old Adolf Hitler was a Christian. He definitely was.
But was he though?
He had God with us engraved on everything.
He also had like a whole lot of weird neo-pagan stuff. And I'm not entirely convinced that Wolfenstein isn't based on actual events.
What the hell? Seriously?
Dude, they were seriously into the occult. It was weird.
I know he was, but still.
But that could have just been all the meth they were doing.
I mean,
I know this is a weird question, but I don't know how much of it is the occult and meth and Nazism. Like, it's like the chicken and the egg. I don't know which one leads to the other. But there's definitely a correlation with those three, specifically meth and Nazism. Those lead to each other somehow.
I mean, when you look at the amount of meth usage within the neo-Nazi groups in the United States,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm still I'm still completely on board with correlation not equating to causation, but at the same time, yeah, that seems to pop up quite a bit.
It could be that after you do meth, Nazism makes sense to you.
I think that would require a lot of meth.
Well, the people that were catching it, they've done a lot.
Yeah.
There was a guy in close to where I used to live that he what was it? He tried to dress up as a woman to escape law enforcement whenever he would drive his car. He would get in his car, dress up as a woman, and then hope that no one caught him. But
okay, so looking at some information about Che Guevara, he certainly appears to be an atheist, because when they talk about Guevara's home and everything, that he was a enthusiastic and eclectic reader. His interests included Karl Marx, go figure, Vladimir Lenin, again, go figure. Although Franz Kafka, that one strikes me as interesting.
Well, Kafka strikes everyone as interesting because he's brilliant.
Yeah, no, Kafka is brilliant. I'm talking about Guevara's interest in him, despite being like a raging communist.
Because he's a hipster.
But also a fan of H.G. Wells, Robert Frost, Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay. There's something that I guess I have in common apparently with Che Guevara is I do like the writings of Jean-Paul Sartre.
And riding motorcycles.
Oh, he was. Oh, that's right. The Motorcycle Diaries. Yeah.
Okay, Karl Marx, atheist.
Yeah. And he liked William Faulkner.
Okay, that one's weird. That doesn't make any kind of sense.
Well, no. The reason why I say that it does make at least a little bit of sense is because he's got the same kind of oddball writing style like what Kafka did. Kafka was all about these really cerebral things, whereas Faulkner approached things from a more out there perspective. I mean, considering that there's at least a few different stories where, one of the main characters has a speaking role throughout the majority of the work, and the character's dead.
Yeah.
Like, there was one where it was talking about like a home funeral or something like that in his favorite fictional county that he made up, and the whole thing was told from the perspective of the corpse.
Oh, like Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, pretty much.
Saved by the For Whom the Bell Tolls.
No.
I can't even approve my own on that one.
Yeah, the whole world is now dumber for having listened to you say that.
I thought you were.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
So bad that it just turned you into a theist?
No, it just turned me into the Jeopardy principle from Billy Madison.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to move on to our next story, and we're going to talk about.
What we got to, guys, says he's an atheist, but he also claims, or people say he's an atheist. He claims to be a humanist, and that he's basically a spiritualist, and we're just like, yeah, we're giving up.
No, he's not making any sense. I mean, granted,
screen your articles.
What?
Screen your articles.
That's the sad thing, is I do screen my articles. So this is from the Chattanooga Times Free Press, although they pulled it from, looks like breakpoint.org. And they're talking, and Breakpoint says the new atheism is old news because it couldn't explain sin. What? No?
Atheism can explain sin. It's a fair statement.
Atheism doesn't explain sin. No, atheism doesn't explain sin because in atheism there is no sin.
Culinary arts does not explain lightning.
Yeah, go figure. Quantum physics doesn't describe the internal workings of a combustion engine.
Psychology doesn't explain gravity.
It's like calling a fish dumb because it can't climb a tree.
Yep.
To bring up the Einstein quote.
I agree with you 100%. A fish can't climb a tree. Bam.
No, they can't. Although, I don't know. Those snakeheads can do some really freaky shit sometimes, man.
Yeah. So can mud skippers.
That's true. Snakeheads are way scarier, though. Stop. No. No.
That's a mud skipper. That's all they do. They come up out of the water, they lay on the mud, and they go.
There needs to be alcohol in this to deal with you on this crap today.
We're too close to the beer stream. Don't you do the beer stream in like an hour?
No, I'm not doing the beer stream.
Anymore?
Will keeps flaking on me.
Oh wow! We dropped names.
He's the only person that's ever been on the beer stream with me.
Oh, okay.
Will keeps flaking. Every time I get it started, I get it announced, I get it ready to go. I'll sit in studio and wait 20, 30 minutes, and he never shows up. Blow up his Skype, doesn't answer. Blow up his text messages, doesn't answer until hours after the fact. Facebook, doesn't answer. Email, doesn't answer. So until I find another co-host for that, or develop enough of a following where they want it brought back, even if it's just me doing it, then yeah, consider a pin being in the beer stream for a while. Beer stream is officially on hiatus, folks.
Well, as a teetotaler, I personally support your decision to reduce the beer intake and to focus on the.
Who said there was a reduction in beer intake?
A reduction in public intoxication.
I dare you to go through and watch any of my beer streams. Name one where I'm intoxicated.
Well, then what was the point of it?
The point of it was to talk about a particular philosophical or theistic or atheistic topic, and also share interesting beers that we found.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it was an actual substantive program. It was just substance plus alcohol.
I had a friend that he had a podcast, and I think he still does. He got picked up. I think it's called Drink Until You Podcast. And basically, I might be getting the idea of it wrong, but they would go to concerts and then they would come back and then they would drink beers while they talked about the concert and like talk about other things.
Okay. Yeah, no. Like I had a whole like program track lined out for it. But he too flaky. I even had it where the idea was to have a philosopher theme, or where like every month there would just be one beer stream or special stream that was dedicated to a particular philosopher and their work. And then instead of beer, it would be whatever their alcoholic beverage of choice was.
So you'd go over a historical figure, like a philosopher, and what was their favorite drink?
Yes, talk about their life, talk about what they offer to philosophy, look at particular arguments that they came up with, merits, detriments, that kind of thing, and the whole while drinking what they drank, or as close an approximation as we could get to it. Like one was going to be, hell, I can't remember his last name now. George something or other, and one of his favorite poisons of choice was Irish whiskey, and so I had a bottle of Jameson waiting for that one. That sort of thing.
I thought you were gonna say George Thorogood, the blues singer.
No, not George Thorogood.
Because he drinks alone.
With nobody else.
Yeah. Because that's the definition of drinking alone, just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, no, he made an entire chorus about it. Entire song. And, I still don't know why that was popular.
I'm going to blame it on depression and the 80s.
I don't know. I think that came out before the 80s.
Even better, the 70s. Disco was around.
I got to look it up now.
Quite a good time to be depressed. I shouldn't make that. It's never a good time to be depressed. If you have depression.
No, it came out in 1985.
Oh, I was right the first time. It was the 80s.
Yeah. It's smack dab in the middle of them.
I do stand by the joke that the song was popular because of depression, though. Because that's...
Yeah, I can see that. And I think, although actually I think one of the biggest reasons why it was popular is not just because of that, but because it was one of the first things that he released after Bad to the Bone, which came out in 82. So I think to some extent he was probably still riding the fame train from that.
Bad.
Just stop.
Stutter. My generation.
Our generation. Anyways, going through and looking at this, New Atheism is old because it couldn't explain sin. Talks about early 2000s across the digital and print world of Christian apologetics. The so-called New Atheism was the central topic of conversation. Authors like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and the late Christopher Hitchens generated quite an audience by attacking religion in general and Christianity in particular, portraying both as irrational evil forces in society. Friggin' correct. Dawkins, yeah, he did that. Although he attacked religion as a whole. Sam Harris and Chris Hitchens looked almost exclusively at Islam. Sam Harris still doing that. The closest that Sam Harris came to actually addressing Christianity as a whole was in the moral landscape. And even then, that book focuses on being moral and defining morality without a religion. So it doesn't, it has shit all to do with any specific religion. This is just, to me, that's Breakpoint trying to claim some kind of victim point. Books like The God Delusion. What?
You said Point Break?
Breakpoint.
Oh.
Let's see. Books like The God Delusion, God is Not Great, and The End of Faith argued that belief in God was unscientific. Yes, it is.
I just got to take a moment here. He actually titled a book, God is Not Great.
Yeah.
That is the most kindergarten level insult book title I could possibly think of. Because it's not an explanation of God is not great. No, it is literally, at the time it was written, the phrase that a lot of evangelical Christians used is God is great, God is good. Let us thank him for this food. But it's like, I'm going to take the phrase God is great, I'm just going to put the word not in there and see how many people that makes angry.
No, Hitchens released that and published it in May of 2007. And the full title of the book is God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. And this was at a time where a lot of who Hitchens was going after was Islam again. Because that's like from the mid-90s all the way up until his death, that's what he went after the hardest.
But it's still, God is great is still a popular saying in Islam.
Yeah. That's what they tended to yell at the top of their lungs before pressing a button and turning themselves into confetti.
I'm not going to be I understand that a lot of terrorists have said that, but
I was being euphemistic on purpose.
Okay. So, but I still think that that doesn't excuse the fact that it is lazy and childish as a book title.
No, actually, it's a little inventive. Nobody else did it before then. I mean, come on. I honestly think Hitchens did with his book titles like what Robert Price does with his now. Like, for instance, I'm sure you're familiar with the movie and musical Jesus Christ Superstar, right?
I've heard of it.
Price just recently released a book a few months ago called Jesus Christ Superstition.
Okay, but here's the thing.
Like that's the point of it is to be tongue in cheek. It's to be creatively assholish about it.
But it's not a current thing that a lot of people quote. It's a pop culture reference that is obscure enough to be clever.
Yeah.
Adding the word not in there is not clever. It is not clever. Like, superstar and superstition is a little bit of a wordplay. I'll give them credit for that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever. But just adding the word "not" is not clever at all.
I mean, consider the entire book was a case being made against organized religion. You know, if you're going to attract attention, then you need a catchy title. And The End of Faith. That, I think, is a Sam Harris book.
Which sounds like a Depeche Mode album that needs to be written.
Sam Harris, yes. The End of Faith, Religion, Terror, and the Future of Reason. And it's all the same as like what Hitchens wrote in God Is Not Great. That came out this one came out in 2004. It's a book by Sam Harris concerning organized religion, the clash between religious faith and rational thought, and the problem of intolerance regarding religious fundamentalism. Which I think we can agree, religious fundamentalism, not really a good thing in a lot of ways.
I think it depends on how we're defining it. I've seen a lot of negative things associated with fundamentalism, but there's also, if you look at just the word fundamentalism, there's positive aspects to the dictionary definition of the word, but I can't really think of any group that's called themselves a fundamentalist that hasn't had some kind of glaringly awful aspect to them.
Yeah, like the NIFB.
We talked about them last week, right?
2 weeks ago, the New Independent Fundamental Baptists.
Not actually Baptist.
What?
So sick of all these groups. They're like, oh, we're going to call ourselves Baptists. And the Baptist General Convention is like, please do not associate yourself with us. We do not want to have anything to do with you. You cannot come to our meeting.
Well, that's how it goes. Saying that argued that belief in God was unscientific. It is unscientific. Sorry, it's
okay.
Really straightforward. And that unbelief would make us all better people.
I will not believe that.
I mean,
belief in God is the definition of not scientific.
Yeah. You may be thinking to yourself, I haven't really thought of those guys in quite a while. Dawkins, no. Hitchens and Harris, for me, not a daily basis, but you know.
Is Harris the one that kind of looks like that Canadian sociologist that everyone's angry at?
I don't know.
Jordan Peterson?
No, Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris don't look anything alike.
Okay. Well, who else am I thinking of? It looks like Jordan Peterson.
But Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson have been on stage together a couple of times, talking about various things. I think it was when Pangburn philosophy was still actually good.
Maybe I just get them mixed up because they were on stage and I didn't know who was who.
I mean, possibly, but
was Sam Harris
what?
Was Sam Harris a comedian?
No. Sam Kinison was a comedian. Sam Kinison is dead. Okay.
But Christopher
kind of a really shittily, in all honesty, Sam Kinison died in a really shittily ironic way. He kicked alcoholism and then was killed by a drunk driver.
Oh, that is terrible.
Yeah. Like I said, he died in a very shittily ironic way. At least I think that was Sam.
Well, his whole career was also kind of ironic. I mean, he was a Pentecostal preacher that spent his entire career telling jokes about how much he hated religion.
Yeah. In all honesty, Sam Kinison is still one of my favorite comedians.
Okay, but Sam Kinison and Chris
Sam Harris are not the same person.
And you're sure of this?
Oh my God. Okay. For you, Harry, and only for you will I do this.
Have you ever seen them in the same room together at the same time?
Shut up.
Batman Bruce Wayne problem going on.
Okay, this is Sam Kinison. He died in 1992 in Needles, California.
Right.
He was 5'7". Okay.
Okay.
So, Sam Harris. This is Sam Harris. He is not dead.
Sorry.
He's also not a comedian. He's an author, neuroscientist, philosopher, and a podcast host. Sam Kinison died before podcasts were even a thought.
But I said Christopher Hitchens and Sam Kinison.
Sam Harris.
Yeah. No, Sam Kinison and Christopher Hitchens.
Okay, fine. It doesn't. Number one, there's Christopher Hitchens.
Okay.
He died in 2011. So that's almost 20 years after Kinison died. On top of that, he was very English with a very British accent.
But so is Jimmy Carr, and he's a comedian. So that doesn't prove anything.
But it proves that Christopher Hitchens is not Sam Kinison. Do I need to play one of these things is not like the other song from Sesame Street for you? I'll do it.
No, I'm good. I just wanted to see how long I can keep that. I can't keep a straight face, so it's not fun anymore.
Anyways, back to the article.
Viewers.
What?
Do we have any viewers?
Currently, no.
I really want someone to be the first time that they're tuning in and they just hear me like, but is this person a cat?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
So are we not even going to worry about the rest of the article because it's kind of already like debunked itself?
I don't know. We'll go through a couple of things. See if there's anything
what is new atheism, by the way?
New atheism. So, new atheism as a whole. It's kind of the... It was a term coined in the early 2000s. It was coined by a journalist. I want to say, I think it was Gary Wolf. I'll have to Google it real quick. Hang on. Yes, New Atheism is a term coined in 2006 by the journalist Gary Wolf to describe the positions promoted by some atheists of the 21st century. This modern-day atheism is advanced by a group of thinkers and writers who advocate the view that superstition, religion, and irrationalism should not simply be tolerated, but should be countered, criticized, and exposed by rational argument wherever their influence arises in government, education, and politics.
So new atheism is a soft word for anti-theism.
No, it lends itself to and often overlaps with anti-theism and secular humanism, particularly in its criticism of what many new atheists regard as the indoctrination of children and the perpetuation of ideologies founded on belief in the supernatural.
So that's how they're similar. How are they different?
They're different in that anti-theism is always on the attack, and they want religion eradicated entirely, almost by any means necessary in some cases, depending on which anti-theist you talk to.
Yeah.
They want religion outlawed. New atheism, it didn't want that. It wanted religion to go the way of the dodo, like many other beliefs before that had gone. They wanted to treat it scientifically. Like, for instance, we used to adhere to a geocentric model of the solar system. We don't anymore because we found evidence indicating that the Earth is not the center of the solar system, and things do not orbit around us except for the moon.
It's basically the difference in level of militancy.
Right. In that new atheism isn't really militant. In fact, I would fall into the category of new atheist because I'm not against someone believing in something. I'm not. I'm against someone using it, or I'm against someone using their religion to force public policy.
Okay.
So
basically,
that's what a lot of new atheism is we don't like the fact that theistic lawmakers continuously try to pass more and more things that go against science in a lot of ways, such as the way we handle teaching, the way we handle science education in the South in general, especially in places like Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma, which are some of the worst offenders when it comes to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Like that's our level of anti-theism as far as that goes. Like, for instance, I personally kind of fall more in line to what another YouTuber, R and Raw, calls himself, which is an epistemist, meaning that completely dismiss faith as a category of knowledge in its entirety, because
I'm more of an
it's not knowledge. Faith is not knowledge by any categoric measure at all. Because knowledge is described as justified true belief. Faith, on its face, has no justification. It's belief without evidence. So it can't be knowledge.
Yeah, I could agree to that.
Hence why I'm an epistemist. Same with R and Raw. He coined the term. Or one of his followers did, I think. It was either him or one of his Patreon supporters. I'm not sure exactly who, because, even being an atheist, someone can still have faith in something. Atheism just means you eschew belief in a deity. There are a lot of atheists who are still who are spiritual to some degree. They
believe
say what?
Who believe in quartz rocks and the power of minerals.
Yeah, stupid shit like that. And so they put faith in things unnecessarily, and so I don't particularly care for that kind of crap. So I fall under the label of epistemist, and I'm actually quite fond of that label.
Well, don't give up hope. when you get the opportunity, try to be an optometrist.
Why would I want to be an optometrist?
Look at the bright side, the sunny side of things. You don't have to be an epistemist all the time.
I do believe that was your first instance of fractal wrongness.
Of what?
Fractal wrongness.
That's a new term for me. What's that? Because an epistemist just sees things as the negative way that they are, and an optometrist
No, it has nothing to do with being negative.
help see things better.
It has nothing to do with seeing things negatively.
But an optometrist does see things better, right? Or they help you see things better. So you got the glass half full and the glass half empty. And if you don't have an optometrist, you don't see a glass at all.
This is you right now, Harry. You are not just wrong, you are recursively wrong. The wrongness of every possible iteration of any of your arguments is self-similar with the wrongness of your entire worldview. Fractal wrongness. Congratulations, Harry. Not sure. That's an award I would want to win, but you know what? You won it, buddy. But anyway,
You got me in like a Laurel and Hardy type mood today.
apparently so. So do we want to go over the article that you presented today, or because it does kind of preface what you're talking about with apologetics and whatnot and your opinion thereof?
Oh, I got to get serious again? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can go ahead and get started on my kind of worldview. I never really got into apologetics. I went to college. I was surrounded by a lot of it, and for a positive, like I got to see what people were talking about, but people got really into it. Like people would like sit in their dorm rooms, like with C.S. Lewis, just like, dude, this is so mind blowing. Like oh my gosh, and I was just like, I'm gonna go play GTA or Madden or something, and I never like really got into the actual deep dive world of apologetics, and it never made sense to me, and I couldn't really figure out, well, people keep bringing it up, and we talked about what was the term that you used last week? Presupposition?
Presuppositional apologetics, yes.
Yeah, presuppositionalism. I was like, I've heard these arguments before, but I never really like looked into them to really understand, because I just kind of dismissed it on its face value. And I was trying to think, well, why is that? And I went back to the only thing that I ever really use or that I try to only have. I really try to only have religious views that are within this book. Okay.
Okay.
If I can't,
Just simply that one, no other printing. Has to be that exact Bible.
No, but it's really nice if it is, because this is the one that I keep referring to. That has the brief interpretations and everything on the back. So, like, There's an example. It's got the verse, and it's got like, oh, well, in medieval English, this actually meant this, and if you go back to the Hebrew, it means this, and that's like, okay, good. I actually understand what the original writers and the original translators were thinking and how they possibly could have misinterpreted something between them, and I can kind of come to something that makes sense. So,
okay, so kind of like reading Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in high school. You got the old Middle English on the left half of the page, and then you have modern English on the right.
Yeah, and I would recommend that for anyone who is an evangelical Christian, that you don't read just one interpretation or one version. Okay.
Yeah,
If you
no,
want to,
I'll agree with you on that one, because like I don't have any copies of them anymore, but I used to also have a copy of the Book of Mormon. I had the NWT, the the
New World.
the Charles Taze Jehovah's Witness Bible. I used to have a Millerite translation, which is what the split up, the schism within Millerite led to Jehovah's Witnesses. I had, I don't know what happened to this one. I used to have a Douay Rheims Bible, printed in 1916. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an old one. And nowadays I have a few different translations. There's one or two that I don't pay attention to at all. One of them being, oh shit, what was it? The NIV.
Yeah.
I don't waste any time with that one. KJV and NKJV, I'll mess with here and there. The ESV, the English Study Bible, or the ESV translation, I go back and forth on that one. There's translation errors that I find in there every once in a while, and or not necessarily translation errors, but unintentional shifts in meaning.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a problem with both ESV and RSV.
Yeah. I stick with this one mostly during the show because I have it in hand.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm researching a Bible verse on my own, I usually just go to BibleGateway.com
Yeah.
and flip through like a dozen different translations and be like, okay, here's how they differ. Here's what I'm getting away from it. Here's what I'm pulling away from all this.
Yeah, I used to have like the actual software downloaded that had like a whole shit ton of different translations in there. Although one that I kind of kept going back to was Strong's Concordance, because it had all the translations, the literal Hebrew words, how they got to want to this meaning instead of that meaning, and that kind of thing. That's back when I studied really hard because I thought I wanted to go to seminary.
Yeah. And I would recommend that if you want to argue with a Christian about anything religious,
Strong.
do not start quoting from the King James Version about something that they believe that's wrong. First of all, don't do that because it's rude. Second of all, if you have an actual theological issue that you want to reach an understanding with them, go to Strong's and then do some research.
Yeah.
The King James Bible is hands down the greatest work of literature in the English language. It is the most important book to the Western world. That does not mean it is the most accurate. That just means that it is, when it came out, it was the most important book that was available to the West. And it had a lot of important things in there.
Well, it was also one of the first Bibles that was actually mass produced, in particular the 1611 version. That was one of the first. That was the first one mass produced on Gutenberg's printing press, and that's one of the reasons why it became so important. But also, there were a lot of retro edits that were put in there because they challenged the king's divine right to rule, and Jimmy didn't like that.
Yeah.
So he had certain.
And that's the biggest problem
changed
with the King James Bible. When you look at it, and this is one of my people's big problem with why we came to America, was it was as much as we were trying to get individual sovereignty over, your religious view. It was something between you and your preacher, or you and God directly.
Mm-hmm.
The King Bible was authorized by the British government,
Right.
and that meant that it was subject to edits, in much the same way that a producer comes in and edits what a script writer's original vision for his characters is. That's
Right.
not
So,
true to the story.
Breaking from all that and kind of steering back towards apologetics, which is kind of what we're talking about on this one.
Yes.
So we're getting back into it. Yes, last week we ran into someone who definitely was headed towards the presuppositional format for apologetics, and doing so in not just a roundabout way, but a really weird way, because he could have got to that point without going through and trying to redefine every single friggin' term that he kept bringing up.
He was trying to do it in using the language of science.
No, he wasn't even using the language of science. Everything he was talking about was pure philosophy. Uniformity of nature,
Yeah.
That's a metaphysical philosophical concept. But he was going about it in such a way that he was constantly redefining terms. Like, he was using the word intelligibility, but he wasn't using it the way he wasn't using it to the definition of what intelligibility means in philosophy. When he was talking about meaningfulness, again, meaningful has a specific definition, even in philosophy. And he was being cagey about it, and instead of using the word intelligibility, he used the word meaningful or meaningfulness to try and smuggle his bullshit definition back into the conversation.
I feel like you're reliving that moment.
I'm not necessarily reliving that moment. It's more, that was an important discussion that needed to be had, and I wish I had been better prepared to deal with his nonsense than I was, because he had me where I kept having to second guess and go and look up virtually every damn word that came out of his mouth to try and make sense of the word salad. And none of his definitions matched up. Like,
it also didn't, that there was a lot of over talking and interrupting going on.
That's why
so that no one on to anything that he would say something, and then you would start to respond, and then he'd be like, no, you're not understanding, you're not comprehending, and it's like, okay, we're not getting anywhere.
Why do you think I started muting his ass every 10 seconds? Jeez.
I knew exactly why you did it. I was just saying that was another thing.
Yeah. He was trying to hijack the show to where no one could get a word in edgewise, and try to forcibly boil it down to yes and no questions, when that's not how any of this works, especially not in philosophy. There are certain things that tend towards black and white. And when you're talking about logic, you want it to be as black and white as possible. But even in just those three laws of logic, law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and law of excluded middle, you can get lost in nuance very easily and very quickly. Like, for instance, one of the big arguments that comes out of the presup camp these days, and has for a while, goes back to Greg Bonson and Cornelius Van Til. Its most recent iteration comes from someone named Matt Slick from carm.org. I forget what the hell carm stands for. It really doesn't matter. Matt Slick's not that important, or important at all, honestly. But it's called the tag argument. It's the transcendental argument for the existence of God. And it's trying to argue about the laws of logic themselves can have being able to only come from God, essentially. It is ultimately what it boils down to. And it creates throughout the argument what's generally considered a false dichotomy, at least for those who disagree with it. And it says that the laws of logic are either physical or conceptual, and claim that this doesn't violate the law of excluded middle or the law of non-contradiction. It doesn't, but it's not a true dichotomy. There's actually two dichotomies contained within that statement. They're either physical or not physical, conceptual or not conceptual. And it is entirely possible for it to be not physical and not conceptual. And so by trying to run it out that way with that poorly structured dichotomy, the argument starts to fall apart.
Could something be both physical and conceptual?
No. Conceptual. So conceptual in philosophy means it's entirely contained within the mind, and it has no physical representation.
But the Platonic forms are both.
Are they?
You have the form of chair, and then you have like the physical chair that matches that form.
But is that not a... No, the physical thing is that thing we call chair. The word chair is conceptual. Saying the word chair does not manifest a chair.
I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, you're right, because...
long story short, philosophy is fucked off, man. Okay? That's how it is. I mean, if we're going to be completely honest, philosophy it's fucked off. But it's designed to make you think. And people wonder why so many philosophers were drunks. It's because thinking about stuff like this all day long, day in and day out, I would say this would drive just about anyone to drink. That was Mountain Dew and nothing else.
Like Hillbilly Mountain Dew or like Pepsi?
Wait, what? Okay, hang on. What the hell is Hillbilly Mountain Dew?
Oh, you don't know about that Hillbilly Mountain Dew, do you?
All right. I have a feeling this is going to reek of bullshit, but go on.
It's not. This is all real. This is why they call it Mountain Dew. They call it Mountain Dew because in the Appalachia areas, they would make a kind of moonshine that they would refer to as Mountain Dew. Very highly distilled, highly potent. A lot of times made out of wood. It's wood. A lot of times it was wood alcohol moonshine.
So turpentine.
And so, yeah. Turpentine that you would drink.
Yep. I don't know. That scares me a little bit, in all honesty, because that makes me think of a dude that used to advocate turpentine enemas, dude by the name of Sunfruit Dan.
Now it is terrifying because it'll drive you blind, but
yeah,
here's another thing. That's what the drink is named after. Yeah. Anyway, neither here nor there. But there's your backstory to Mountain Dew.
Yeah. But so going back to the whole talk about apologetics and things like that. From a philosophical standpoint, you have two methods of gaining knowledge. You've got a priori knowledge. This is knowledge that you can claim with certainty, but it doesn't offer any genuine content about the world.
Yes.
This is the whole. This goes back to the argument: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Right. So
you can claim that with certainty, but it doesn't really offer you any genuine content about the world. That is deductive reasoning or top-down reasoning. Then you have a posteriori knowledge. This is knowledge that you can never claim with certainty, but it offers genuine content about the world and about reality. For instance, that's how science functions. It's all inductive reasoning. We start at the bottom and you work your way up. That's why we've come as far as we have in the prevailing 1,000+ years, technologically and societally. It's through the use of inductive reasoning and its application to scientific exploration. We want to know how a thing works, so we make an educated guess about how the thing works, and then we test it, and if that causes that thing to work, then we can say, okay, we've got a pretty good idea that this is why that thing does what it does.
Right.
We're not going to claim it 100%, but the more we repeat the test, the more we repeat the experiment, the more we get the same result. Okay, we're pretty sure that this is why this does this thing. And it's always going to do this thing this way.
Okay.
And so that's bottom-up reasoning. That's inductive logic. Now, people call it, you hear the phrase, the fallacy of induction thrown around. Using inductive logic is actually not fallacious. The fallacy is the fallacy of bad induction or weak induction. Let's see. So, for instances, fallacies of weak induction it occurs when an argument's premises are not strong enough to support the conclusion, meaning that they're logically relevant, but that's not always enough for them to be supportive. These fallacies also involve generally an emotional appeal to make their case. There's others like that. For instance, appeal to unqualified authority. Like if you're talking about physics, you wouldn't appeal to a pastor when making an argument about a physics principle.
Unless he happened to be a physicist. But we're speaking in general terms on this just for sake of understanding. If you have a non-physicist pastor, you would not appeal to the non-physicist pastor for an argument about physics. Okay, that's accurate.
And in all honesty, and there's also appeal to a weak authority. For instance, if I'm going to talk about gravity today, the modern gravitational theory, past a certain point, I'm not going to appeal to Isaac Newton, because Isaac Newton's gravitational knowledge works locally. It doesn't work celestially.
Right.
And then Einstein's theories on gravitation, in particular his general and special relativity, as well as the field equation, that works really, really well on a macro scale. It doesn't work on a quantum scale. So when talking about quantum gravity, for the most part, I'm not going to appeal to Albert Einstein, because it simply wasn't a thing when those two people were doing what they were doing. So that's also a way of doing it. Another one is appealing to ignorance, which is A lot.
Don't say it.
Yeah, a lot of theistic arguments are appeals to ignorance. You can't
That's
prove
mean.
you can't prove God doesn't exist. Okay? It's not the argument. That's an appeal to ignorance. That also goes really hand in hand. This isn't an argument of this isn't a fallacy of weak induction but it is still a fallacious argument, and that's the argument from personal incredulity. I don't understand this, therefore God. Or I don't understand this, therefore this other thing. Like, for instance, flat Earth.
I've never been so attacked in this show up until this moment.
Like, for instance, flat earthers. Okay?
I feel less attacked now.
This object right here, this is the favorite argument from flat earthers. What direction is this? What direction did that fall?
Center.
Yes, exactly. Most would answer down. Technically, there is no down. Down is an arbitrary distinction. It's arbitrary based on what's called an inertial framework.
No one's ever just like gotten a cup of water and tied a string to the end and spun it around and been like, where's the water going away from?
Exactly.
My hand? Okay, then not down, not up, not anything.
Oh, hey, we've got a comment from Grateful to Jesus.
Yes.
Atheism.
Sounds like my friend.
Atheism lack moral arguments because they have no one who sets a standard of absolute truth besides themselves. There is no absolute truth. Sorry, you're wrong.
Well, okay. Let's look at that comment again. Let's break it down because there's some really relevant stuff in there. Okay,
sure. So I'm going to assume that they meant to say atheists, not atheism. So,
okay.
And English may not be this individual's first language, so we're not judging that.
Okay.
Go.
Atheism lacks moral arguments. So there are a lot of atheists that do come up with moral arguments. There are a lot of atheists that will make arguments about morality on a subjective way.
Yes,
because they have.
Sam Harris is a good example with the book The Moral Landscape.
Okay, but here's the problem with that. And we can remove the comment now if you want.
Okay.
Is that without a definition of absolute truth, which is inherent within religion, or at least in Christianity, your subjective morality is not foundationally secure. It can vary by time period, and it can vary by.
Well, also that we, like, as atheists, we don't subscribe to absolute truth. We don't subscribe to big T truth. We talk about little t truth. That's all we ever talk about. And I will use Aron Ra's definition for this because it is the most succinct and accurate one. The truth is what the facts are. And a fact is a point of data that is objectively verifiable and is not in dispute. For instance, it is a fact that if I pick this up and drop it from high up enough, it will accelerate without air resistance at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared. That's a fact. So it is the truth that when I drop this, it will fall at that rate. Grateful to Jesus brings this up. We see absolute truth in math. No, you don't. 2 + 2 = 4. Yes, it does. Showing us absolute truth exists. No, it doesn't. It is a fact that 2 + 2 = 4. That is little t truth. The truth is what the facts are. It is a fact of mathematics that 2 + 2 = 4 and will always equal 4. That's not absolute truth. That's just true.
Let me go ahead and break in because I think this kind of brings back to our point of what we were discussing earlier. So when we're talking about absolute truth, we're talking about the nature and the existence of God. And apologetics often tries to explain that. And going back, I've never really been a big fan of apologetics because I don't think that using mathematical concepts or scientific concepts to justify that God must exist is appropriate. Now, we're looking at this example of morality and moral arguments. The best example is directly from Jesus Christ himself. There's a parable about the person that builds their house upon the sand and builds their house upon rock.
Right.
Okay. Let's look at this as the atheist, and I'm not doing this to accuse one person or the other, but it's because it gives an example as to what we're discussing. If you have a solid foundation where you have an absolute truth for your morality, that is a rock. It is solid. You're building a house upon it. You're building your moral understanding and your moral argumentation upon that solid truth. If you have a shifting or subjective morality, which would be, and Christians would view that as the atheist worldview, that doesn't mean that you are any less capable of building a house. Your house may be just as nice or even nicer. The problem is that if it is a shifting morality, your stability upon what it is built upon is not confirmed as if you were to build upon a solid foundation.
But the problem that you run into, with that is it's an argument of special pleading. It's a fallacious argument in and of itself. The reason why is because no matter what, your morality is still not objective. It's still a subjective morality because it is subject to the morality as instilled by God.
That's just word salad that you're throwing together. The fact that it is by God and not by man is what makes it objective.
No,
there's
objective. No, objective means mind independent.
Yes, it's
morality is subject to the will of God. It is subject to the mind of God. Therefore, it cannot be objective. That's not word salad.
No, it's also word salad because you're defining the God of mind to be that of the God of a person, where it is over time. You're using humanistic and anthropomorphic terms to describe an omnipotent and omniscient conscience that is beyond the grasping of your mind,
but is still a mind on its own.
The word mind is used. We're dealing with a better word would be the essence of the truth. If you're looking at the Gospel of John, you're looking at almost a gnosis, a universal, all-existing, all-encompassing truth that is beyond anything that a human mind could possibly comprehend. A completely unscientific entity.
You're getting dangerously close to sounding like a presuppositionalist.
Well, I'm not saying that it proves his existence.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's
anyway, Grateful to Jesus brings up another thing. Okay. They ask, is rape always wrong? If so, on what standard? If there is no absolute truth, sounds like rape is not absolutely wrong in your worldview. I love the jumps to extreme examples, like right off the bat. It never fails. So, yes, rape is always wrong. Why? Because we as humans have defined what rape is. We have defined that term into existence. We've defined what represents that action. So, hang on. Okay. Even though the morality is subjective and it's subject to the society that you're a part of, we can make objective statements about that. Say, for instance, to determine whether or not something is moral, you want to base it on suffering, or if it causes undue harm to somebody. Okay, you could, in theory, hook a person up to an fMRI and subject them to different stimuli. Different parts of the brain light up based on what area, based on what they're feeling, what they're experiencing at that point. Whether they're experiencing it as whether it's lighting up the pleasure centers of the brain or just lighting off pain receptors and nothing else. So to a certain extent, you can use an fMRI to make an objective statement about morality as to whether or not an action will be moral based on what it does. So based on that, we know that rape is wrong because of the detrimental effects that it has on a person. And that's an observational fact that causes harm, especially when we define harm as an increase in suffering or the deliberate removal of choice from somebody.
Okay, so we can agree that under both of our definitions, we're looking at modern people and we're looking at our society, and we can agree that rape is always wrong. But here's the difference. Objectively, according to a Christian, rape is always wrong and has always been wrong for people. That's wrong. That's bad. I heard arguments from
you read the Old Testament and tell me rape has always been wrong and in the eyes of the faithful.
It always has been.
No, it's not.
Where is one place that it said that rape was okay?
It doesn't explicitly say rape is okay, but it says to kill all the males of the area and keep the women for yourselves, especially the virgins. No consent required. Like at that point, you're keeping them as a war wife. You're keeping them as a concubine. That's a sex slave. And you've been told by God you can do this. You keep them for yourselves.
It also lists a lot of different places where it describes it if you are to violently take someone against their will, that
you have to pay their father 30 shekels of silver, and she's yours forever, and you can never get divorced. So yes, very moral. Forcing a rape victim to stay with their rapist for their entire life.
All right. So what you're doing now is an argument of chronological snobbery, where you're looking at the past, and we can agree that it was considered a wrong act. What we disagree on between us as modern people and back then, thousands of years ago, was what the correct punishment and what is considered justice. Okay, the act itself was wrong, but saying that, 30 shekels, that's not a real punishment, that is a complete deflection over whether or not it was objectively a wrong action. That is your justice system and your punishment system of modern time trying to apply it back then. So going back to the original argument, what I was saying was that if we were to accept that it is objectively seen as a wrong thing, and there are parts in the Bible where they do discuss that the actual physical act of rape is a wrong thing. There are some more nebulous areas that you're regarding where it talks about keeping women as as part of your
property,
your system, concubine, whatever. Mm-hmm. I have heard arguments from pro-evolution atheists that have said that humanity would not have come to be as we are today without rape in the early humans, that it was a necessity for humans in order to get stronger and grow. And that is completely antithetical to an objective value set. That's just something that I'm not going to
I'm going to need you to cite a source on that one. I'm going to need you to come back with a source on that one, because I mean, given a little bit of time, I can grab a Bible and I can find the passages in the Old Testament talking about those things.
We could, but we should probably save it for a different show.
We can save it for a different show, but it's like I really would love to see your sourcing on that one, where someone I can see where someone who is an evolutionary biologist may say something like that, and if it's an objective statement about reality, I still don't see where they would. I've not come across that. That's not to say that there hasn't been, but I'm going to need to see a source on that one. So,
okay.
Grateful to Jesus comes back saying two things. Claim rape is defined by humans. Yes, Rape is a word. We invented the word based on the description of an action. Yes, it is defined by humans. Does that mean we can redefine rape? Unfortunately, yes. If we decided to redefine a word, yes, we could. If it reached a great enough consensus where people decide to call it something else or define it as something differently, yes. We see this today with the word racism.
And I would argue that to redefine the word and ignore the objective fact of the action itself
is not a good thing. No. I'm with you on that one. I'm just saying, it's like, yes, unfortunately, language is a human invention, which means we can change the meanings of things.
You can change the meanings of the words, but the action would still be defined as
right. The action remains the same. The action is the action, regardless of what word, regardless of what word we call it. The action is what's bad.
And in fact, people are redefining it right now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing that they're redefining it. It's gone from, in some areas where legally it's defined as only something that
only a man can do to a woman, whereas we know for a fact that sexual assault, regardless of who does it, male or female, it's both biological sexes are capable of committing a heinous act.
And in some areas it was defined as only forceful, but now it's defined as statutory. That's considered a form, which is a good thing.
Right. And we've also defined levels of consent based on age and age difference between parties, even if the parties are consenting. Like, for instance, in the state of Texas, anyone under the age of 15, if I remember right, cannot legally consent to sex. Period. End of discussion.
Now, this is actually a better argument about objective versus subjective morality, because this is something we don't have to do research on. Because if you were to go back even 100 years ago, if you were to go back 1,000 years ago, the ages have changed as to what would be considered of age and underage. But there was always the idea that someone who is underage should not be with someone who is above age within many cultures. Not within all, but within at least the main Western culture, and going back further into biblical cultures, there was some level of adulthood that was defined. Now, whether it was 13,
and there wasn't actually the level of adulthood defined was generally for a young woman having her first period,
and then for a man in the biblical ancient Hebrew culture, it would be after he had gone through the passagehood into manhood, which was usually a religious ceremony.
The bar mitzvah, or what we now know as the bar mitzvah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. Although,
is that subjective or is that objective? Is that objective that
that's still subjective,
or is that subjective? It's subjective if you look at it as the age has changed, but it's objective if you look at it as the overarching idea of there being an age of almost accountability or adulthood that should be respected in that area. That has objectively remained the same. That value is the same. It's just that the actual...
Well, regardless of the value remaining the same, that still doesn't make it objective.
Well, children shouldn't smoke is objective, right?
Children shouldn't smoke. Yes, because we understand the impact. We understand the biological impact that has.
But what about 19 and 20-year-olds? So is it an objective value that children shouldn't smoke, or is it subjective because we've moved it from 18 to 21?
No, it's objective to the point where we know it causes harm to developing lungs, to the point where it can cause early death. It's just that, but it's entirely subjective as far as the age that they're allowed to do it, because, that's based on what we've defined as the age of majority within this country, to allow a person to make that decision for themselves.
So there we go.
So objectively, it's still bad. It's still not good for you. It's still detrimental to your health, whether you're 18, 21, 15, or 87. Smoking is still detrimental to your health, specifically smoking cigarettes. And the reason why I say cigarettes is because a lot of it has to do with the chemical additives, the fiberglass filters, and things like that. Whereas like straight hand-rolled pure tobacco cigars, there has been shown a potential elevated risk in throat and mouth cancers, but not in lung cancer.
Maybe not lung cancer, but any kind of nicotine use is still going to lead to arteriosclerosis.
It can, but again, that's where they talk about things in moderation. Like, for instance, if you drink enough alcohol, your liver will become cirrhotic. But if you
that's a Bible verse, isn't it? About things in moderation.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah.
Anyway, that was a nice little side quest that we went on.
Grateful to Jesus is still commenting.
Oh, okay.
So the next one they bring up is, in your worldview, harm makes rape wrong, but on what standard is harming someone wrong? Okay, we can demonstrate that it causes damage to a person, whether it be emotional, physical, mental, however you want to describe it. We understand it causes damage. If it causes damage and it is not something that is, say, to fix greater damage that's already been done, then it's a bad thing. For instance, we do surgery. That's a great deal of physical trauma that's caused to a person. They endure a great deal of physical trauma. We drug them, which anesthetizing them is not always great, because you have to be so very careful with that, because they could just not wake up, to prevent the brain from experiencing that physical trauma. So that a doctor or a surgeon can go in, correct something that is causing still greater harm to that individual, and then sew it back up.
Well, we kind of need to move past the original part of it where we started talking about rape and harm. And now we need to focus, because what he's breaking down to, the first part of it is kind of a distractor. That doesn't really relate to his argument. The second sentence is really his argument, which is, at what point do we decide that doing harm to another person is actually a bad thing? This goes back to the argument for eugenics, which is the justification that it is okay to sterilize, kill, or maim people if their existence is harmful to your personal worldview about how humanity should progress.
Yeah, and
so at what point
even atheists do not agree with eugenics.
And that's fair. But that's what he said. At what point do we decide that people are given undeniable individual rights that need to be protected, and how can those rights be given without having a God or a creator assign them? Now, I'm sure you can come up with a modern explanation for that, but we do have to respect that as Americans, our understanding of that ordination of natural rights is from Enlightenment era thinking and deism.
In particular, John Locke, yeah.
So there is an acceptance that is what gives people inalienable rights. You can't put someone in slavery for the greater good of getting your business running, because that person they have rights unto themselves that have to be respected. Because
but that's from Enlightenment thinking. That's not entirely due to a Christian mindset, because Christianity, not just Christianity, but Abrahamic religion in general, has had no problem with slavery for a very long time. It enforced slavery.
So you are historically somewhat accurate and mostly inaccurate. up until
Considering
America,
there were like actual regulations for to what degree you could beat the ever loving shit out of your slave.
no, that's completely different. Completely different. Okay? The reason is because in the Hebrew society, in the Bible, slaves were always 100% of the time left over from war. They were always prisoners of war. It was not a generational thing, except what was done to the Israelites in Egypt. That's the only biblical reference to generational slavery. Every other time, it was solely as they are a conquered people who have no home and have no society now, and they're now subjugates of the conquering people. But their children were not continuations in that. The American concept of slavery was the first time on a broad scale that slavery was purely generational and there was no way to get out of it. It was race-based.
Except for when you look at the Hebrew version of indentured servitude, because a Hebrew man could voluntarily sell himself into temporary slavery. But
Yes.
there were regulations within those policies on what could be done to maintain that individual as a slave past their release date. Such as you give him a wife, okay? That wife remains a slave and cannot go with the husband once he's released. Any children had stayed. So yes, that was an example of generational slavery. They were still retained as property of the person whom the individual was indentured servitude to, and they had to leave, or they had the option to remain in servitude for the rest of their life and be marked as a slave to remain with their family.
You're gonna have to share that breakdown of where that's located, because
Okay.
I have not heard of where after someone had finished their life or their sentence that their family would remain in slavery or servitude perpetually.
Yes, they would. That person's new slave wife and new slave children would remain in slavery in perpetuity. And he could either choose to leave and abandon them to their fate, or he could choose to remain enslaved, to stay with them, and be marked as property for the rest of his life.
Well, that'll be another thing we'll have to visit on a later show. We'll have to do a deep dive into these concepts.
And then Grateful to Jesus posts another comment. Either we are evolved bacteria with no value, or we are made in the image of God with ingrained dignity and value. Only one of these says rape being wrong is not subjective. No, in both instances, it's still subjective. In both instances, it's still subjective. And no, we're not evolved bacteria. Bacteria is an entirely separate clade from eukaryota, which is what we are. We're eukaryotes. We're not bacteria.
Yeah, I'm not going to go any further with the debate on whether or not we can prove that morals are objective and that is somehow a proof for the existence of God, because that's kind of how we got into this whole issue with apologetics in the first place.
Yeah.
Instead, I think we can transition back, and if he has comments later, we can come back to him. But
sure, I just wanted to address the last comment that they made.
Yeah. So there's a couple of verses that really popped out to me and kind of led to my worldview of how I look at the world and how I respond to people when I'm quote unquote giving my testimony, or whenever I'm discussing about, why do I believe in God and stuff like that. And a good read for anyone. It's a fantastic story for anyone to read, whether you're a Christian or not, is the book of Job from start to end. It is ancient Hebrew Kafka. Like, that is is some mind mess with you. Like,
Yeah, how
that,
long can we torture this guy and see if he breaks?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the trial in the ancient world, then I don't know what is. All
Well,
right, so
Franz Kafka himself said he based part of it off the Book of Job.
no, I completely would expect it to be.
Yeah. Anyway,
It makes
continue on.
So basically, there's a part in the story where his quote unquote friends, are falling into basically what apologetics are. They're trying to explain the nature of God, and they're making a lot of fallacies, and they're supposing that God follows by human logic, and they're making all these arguments about, well, you got to understand why you deserve this, and you got to understand what God was thinking, and you got to do this. And that's what a lot of apologetics comes across to me as. It's trying to explain God's nature in human terms. And in chapter 38, the Lord answers Job and says, who is this that darkness caused by word? Or I'm sorry, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Basically, why are you talking if you don't know? Who is this that's telling you all this? They know nothing.
Biblical. It's biblical. Why are you talking out your ass, bro?
Exactly. And then it goes further with, gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you will declare to me.
Yeah, biblical Tallahassee, nut up or shut up. We were talking about that earlier.
Or both, actually.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you, when I laid the foundation of the earth, tell me if you have any understanding, who determined its measurements, and surely you'll know. Now, go through all this, and you may say, well, this is basically the biblical appeal to ignorance.
Yes.
Okay?
It is.
And you can make that argument, but at the same time, it is a healthy dose of humility that it is not, I don't want to say logical, but it isn't logical. If God is omnipotent and omnipresent, to try to define him in humanistic terms and expect an answer that would be satisfying, you're not going to get one. And that was a big eye-opener for me. Is it's not that I'm going to appeal that God exists because of my ignorance and how these things work. It's a questioning whether or not God exists is besides the point. That doesn't mean anything. So that's the first part there. It's almost like an existential thing, like an existential crisis of faith, but almost in a hopeful way. Like, it's not important to understand those things. So then what is important? And I look over in Acts, and let me see. In Acts, where is it?
So while you're looking that up, I found a really interesting thing.
Okay.
Here in StreamYard, and I'm assuming it's a YouTube function. There's these three dots you can click on. You can block a user, or you can put a user in timeout. So I guess it just stops. So putting them in timeout just stops them from commenting for a predetermined amount of time.
Yeah. Okay, so here it is in Acts chapter 17. Okay. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, let's see. He was distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued. This is Acts chapter 17, verse 16, and I'm going to go on for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to paraphrase some of it. So he argued.
Just kind of give us the gist of it.
Basically, some of the Greeks come up to him who are not Jews in the city, and they say, what does this babbler want to say? He seems to talk about other gods. And so he goes out and he starts talking with them. And he says something to the effect, when he sees a statue there, it says, this is to the gods that are unknown. And he says, there's an altar with an inscription to an unknown God. What therefore do you proclaim as unknown? This I proclaim to you. So basically, the idea is that
this is one of the conversations with the Sadducees, isn't it?
He starts off with that, but then it leads into where he's meeting the Greeks, the Gentile Greeks.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about, and in acts. Yeah.
Yeah. So a part of it that a lot of people overlook is afterward they reply back and say, for we too are his offspring. Since we're his offspring, we not to think of him as being a deity like gold or silver or anything like that. And then later on in chapter 32, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, we will hear you again on this. And at that point, Paul left them. So he just talked and explained what was going on. Verse 30.
And a lot of people see this as an argument against what we would call today pseudo-intellectualism.
Mm-hmm.
But to some degree, at least a more literal reading of it, or less charitable, whatever you want to call it, it comes across as an attack against intellectualism, period.
Yeah.
As basically attacking being an intellectual. It just, at all. Is kind of viewed as being kind of it lends itself to being considered that being intellectual is a bad thing.
Well, the last part is that, but some of them joined him and became believers. So some people may see it as an attack on intellectualism, but to me, what it really says is he said what he believed. You're not going to outsmart someone and out-logic someone and change their mind, but you say what you're doing. And some people will laugh at you and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Some people will be like, that's interesting. I'd like to hear more in the future.
Yeah.
And some people will be like, that's what I needed to know. That's what spoke to me. And this is my way of life now.
Mm.
What you shared is now what I'm going to dedicate my life to.
Yeah. And
I just think there's no perfect argument that you can tell someone to prove that either God exists.
See, that's the thing, though, is that's the issue that the majority of atheists have with apologists, is that almost all apologists subscribe to a particular form of a particular argument. For instance, William Lane Craig. Kalam cosmological argument, period. But that's his bread and butter. Frank Turek, he's presuppositionalist. Saitin Bruggencate, he's hardcore tag, hardcore presup, and things like that. And they all think that their argument is the end all be all against any other argument, that no matter what, anybody else is always wrong, is always going to be wrong, and that they're always going to be right. And that's the issue that atheists take with people like that. That's the issue that atheists have. Most of us, I think. It's not necessarily an issue with people who are religious, except when they try to use their religion as a cudgel to pass public policy in favor of it. But more often than not, it's those who want to sit there and try to cram religion or cram a particular belief down our throats based solely on some philosophical argument that's not even original to the person talking about it, that's already been torn apart years ago. But they still keep coming back with it. Like, for instance, the Kalam cosmological argument. Okay? In short, it's things that exist. There are things that exist. Things that exist have a beginning. Or things that begin to exist have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Okay, fine. As an atheist, I can grant that entire argument. It doesn't prove a deity exists. But there are a lot of people out there who think that it does. Just because something has a cause doesn't mean there's a God.
Yeah.
I mean, but people think it's like, oh my gosh, that's the end-all be-all argument. Da, 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 da. Not really. I mean, because when you look at it in physics, it doesn't really make much sense. Okay? The universe had a cause to exist. Best we can determine, point of singularity.
Well,
Infinite density and whatnot, and then it expands rapidly. But within that singularity is all of space-time, which means there cannot be before that, because time's not a thing yet.
even from a theological view, if you were to say that because there's a cause, it had to be God, you're now using a human mind test in order to limit or assign responsibility to God.
Yeah, but still,
that's arrogant.
Yeah, but not only that, I'm the kind of atheist that I don't care what a person believes. I'm not trying to change people's minds. Even with this show, the way I see it, the majority of people pretty much have their minds made up as to where they fall on, as to which side of the fence they fall on.
I would disagree with you.
I say pretty much, not 100%. Remember, I'm an atheist. I don't claim anything with 100% certainty.
I think most people claim a team, but they don't really understand it.
I agree with you on that note as well. For instance, like I say, I'm an atheist. If someone were to find empirically verifiable evidence that a deity exists, okay, I'll change my viewpoint. All it will take for me is evidence. That's it.
Yeah.
Evidence that is independently verifiable, falsifiable, empirically obtained, the whole 9 yards for what classifies as evidence within science. Someone showed
you
me
have a paradox, and I hate you for it.
Say what?
Because on one hand, like as my religious views, you're free to do whatever you want. You're going to be my friend no matter what. But like as an evangelical Christian, I do at some point hope, because I think that you would find meaning in it, to have a reconfirmation or an affirmation of God and in that relationship. Only because I think that you would get something out of it. I'm not going to try to change you for anything.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I really hope that it's not because of evidence, because then you miss out upon the gift of faith. And so it's kind of like,
faith is pointless. I will not take anything on faith. Period.
yeah.
End of story. Never. That okay, fine. I'll claim one absolute. I'm never going to take anything on faith. I'll claim that. I'll claim that as a universal. It is universally applicable to me that I will not accept faith as an answer for anything. Because all that tells me is that person either, one, doesn't care the reason why a thing happened, two, gave up trying to figure out what the reason was, or C, is engaged in some form of intellectual dishonesty. And I don't like either of those three. No.
So if you don't see the proof, you're going to doubt.
Yes.
So you would be
a doubting Drew.
Okay. Yeah, I hope
people that know me get the joke. It's okay.
Yeah.
If you don't get the joke, you don't know me. If you don't know me, then endeavor to learn if you really want to. Makes me no never mind either way. But anyway, I don't care about changing a person's mind.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I don't even like talking to apologists. I think apologists are some of the most disingenuous and intellectually dishonest people. I
like talking to apologists about anything but apologism. Is that the right word? Apologetics.
Apologetics. Yeah, that's
because
that other word is that's not a word.
Have you talked with an apologist about any, like a hardcore apologist about something that has nothing to do with apologetics?
Once or twice, and they generally know almost nothing about the topic.
Have you ever had a conversation with like a kid who had a toy that was just out of reach and they knew that they had to listen to you before you would get it down from the shelf and hand it to them?
Yep.
It's the exact same thing.
Yes, because they're sitting there. They are waiting for the moment that they can latch on to you saying one thing. One fucking thing. And they're going to sit there and gnaw on it like a dog on a bone that hasn't had one in a friggin' year. Because they're waiting for it. And that's the only thing they care about talking about.
And I mean, you know, not having faith or believing in something that requires faith, but then not acknowledging whatever you want to say. But that's the mind that I can't get into, is you're living your whole life waiting for, but there's that one thing. There's that thing that I want. You can't sit back and enjoy the moment. You can't just exist and be like, oh, okay, I'm just enjoying life. You're like, but I've got to connect the dots and prove the thing and do the thing, or else I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah,
and you're never going to be happy.
And some idiots find fulfillment in that. But there again, you know, there's a lot of people that find fulfillment in that particular course of action. Most of them do it in something more worthwhile, like theoretical physics, and not religious apologetics.
And I have a lot of respect for people who are great men of faith and science. There are some we can point to historically, but I think that
I'd say not even historically. There's one you can point to right now. He's a devout Roman Catholic and he's an evolutionary biologist. Kenneth Miller, Dr. Ken Miller. He was one of the people whose testimony was instrumental in the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial back in 2005, which got creationism in the form of intelligent design kicked out of schools again.
I think people like that are happy.
Hell, another one you can point to. He's a Pentecostal preacher and one of the most prolific paleontologists of our time. Robert T. Bacher.
Because I don't think that they don't see that their existence is tied to proving whatever it is that they're working on. And I know that not all atheists are like that, but a lot of them that I've interacted with, it's like, I have to prove my lack of belief in God, or else I'm living in an existential crisis.
Yeah, and see, that's one of the reasons why I like the work of Jean-Paul Sartre so much. He was an atheist existentialist. Okay? There is no purpose to life. You exist. What you do with it from here on out is yours.
Yeah.
The purpose of your life is the purpose you derive from it, or the purpose you derive from what other people say about your life. And to me, that's probably to me from a mental standpoint, that is one of the most freeing things I can possibly think of. Yeah. It's the ultimate, to me, it's the ultimate meritocracy. It's whatever I choose to do with my life. That's the purpose of it. If I find enjoyment in it, there I go.
That idea of freedom, I think, from how you're describing it, is something like faith to me.
It's the closest thing to, from a philosophical standpoint, it's the closest thing to describing true libertarian free will, which can't exist. Libertarian free will is not a thing. It can't be a thing, because there's always going to be something that drives us. Like, for instance, we're still slaves to our biology, no matter what.
But you can't scientifically prove Sartre's philosophies, right?
You don't scientifically prove any philosophy.
Do you believe in them? Do you accept them and apply them in your life? Is that what you live by? Those principles? I'm not playing a game to like.
No, I know you're not playing a game. I know you're not playing a game. I live by a lot of the principles that Sartre describes. Yes, in that I agree that there is no objective purpose to my life aside from what purpose I derive from it. Because I'm me. No one else is me. No one else can be me. So why would it matter? Why should it matter what someone else says about my life if I don't agree with it?
And I think that's the thing is like you're intelligent enough that you psychologically know that you're not, quote unquote, having a faith in principle. A principle is something different. This is something different that you understand it. It's a way of looking at its perspective. And I think
right. It's a perspective, and it's not faith because there's nothing unproven about it. I mean, it's the best way I can describe it is I can objectively state that, or I can make an objective statement about my life, and that is based entirely on my subjective experience. Objectively, I'm overweight. I want to do something about that. I am doing something about that. That's a purpose that I derive. From a professional, educational, whatever standpoint, I'm not done yet. There are things that I want to do. So from a subjective standpoint, that's also a purpose that I derive from my experience.
I think that's
so to me, a purpose to a person's life is whatever a person makes of it. If there's a person if there's a young woman out there who thinks her purpose in life is only to get married, have as many children as possible, and be a stay-at-home mom for the rest of her life, if she derives enjoyment from that, if she derives purpose from that, and that's her choice, free to do it. To quote Ron Swanson, this is America. If you want to eat crappy food, balloon up to 600 pounds, and die at the age of 37 from a heart attack, that's beautiful. That's your choice. That's the way I see Sartre's atheist existentialism. I don't derive a purpose from a deity because there's no evidence for a deity. None has ever been presented that meets even a rudimentary standard of evidence. There just hasn't. Does that mean there never will be? Not necessarily. Is it likely? No, it's not likely. Because we've come as far as we have with nothing. It is not likely that we'll find something.
Now I am going to play a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
And I think you'll like this one. So just,
Let's
don't. Okay.
I won't bite your head off just yet.
So the principles that we're talking about, the Sartrean philosophy, if you could somehow scientifically prove it, would you see it as freeing, or would you see it as an obligation?
Let's go through this one more time. I want to make sure I completely understand what you're talking about here. You're saying that if we could find a way to somehow empirically take Sartre's philosophy and say that, yes, based on all available data, this is exactly how things are, full stop. That's what you're saying. Would I find it freeing or obligatory?
Yeah.
I can't say as I know off the top of my head because we don't have a way to currently test that. But to me, I would probably find more freedom in that. Yeah. There would be a bit of, don't get me wrong. I think for a lot of people, a great many people, it would cause an internal existential crisis, the likes of which has never been seen. To suddenly come to the realization that there is no meaning to life. You are who you are because of what you do, what you say, and what you think. You're you defined by you. It's a bit tautological, but it works.
So here's the game I'm leading up to. I guess you call it a game, but here's the point I'm arriving at.
All right.
I think that for someone to be so devoted to apologetics that they want to prove the existence of God takes the joy out of that relationship with God, and at the same time forces them to see people who do not accept it as binarily the enemy.
I can agree with you on that one. And this goes back to my experiences when I was a theist. Grew up Methodist, a little bit of Baptist. Methodism is probably what I may have spent the largest amount of my formative years in, maybe. Close second, or maybe a narrow first, would be Catholicism. I enjoyed both aspects of it. I enjoyed apologetics and Catholicism, at least as far as the early 2000s go. I enjoyed them in that it was not seen as a militant debating thing. It was a fun philosophical exercise.
Yeah. And when you're on the inside, they are. When a believer and you're going through it, it is a fun, reassuring game it's a way.
No, it wasn't even about reassurance. It was just for me, it was fun to think outside of the norm. It was fun to think outside of what I narrowly defined as my worldview.
And a lot of people don't realize how in Christianity, there are lots of denominations and groups that encourage that questioning.
Yeah. And so questioning and things like that, and learning more about science, learning more about standards of evidence, things that qualify and don't qualify, things of that nature. That's a lot of what led me towards being an atheist, is that, I have this belief in this thing. There should be a way to demonstrate this, because we have ways of demonstrating how we know, how we claim to know all these other things. So if we claim to know that this thing is real, then we should be able to demonstrate that. We can't. And so until we can demonstrate that, it doesn't matter whether it exists or not.
The whole thing about, you hear a lot in the evangelical community of God is love.
Mm-hmm. No, love is oxytocin.
Know that song? I want
Yes.
you to show
Just stop.
me.
Just no. No. Love. What is love?
No
Shut
karaoke.
up. Love is oxytocin.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand what that chemical is. What's up?
It looks like we got through that argument.
Yeah, I'd say so. Someone threatening to throw something at you?
No.
Okay. You're watching who I assume is your girlfriend like a hawk. So one of a couple of things is happening.
She's asking me what we're gonna eat for dinner when the show is over.
Oh, I guess that largely depends on when the show is over.
Hopefully now, because we've gone on for 2.5 hours.
That's true, we have. So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up, bring it to a close. Always remember.
You didn't get an article, but he's talking about humility and apologetics. Instead of trying to prove people, basically listen to them and let your life be your guide. Don't try to shut down.
Yeah, and yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't like apologists. Remember the age-old public service announcement: don't butt chug soy sauce. But the new one today: remember, homeopathy is bullshit.
In some cases, literally.
In some cases, literally. But anyways, as always, thanks for tuning into the Sunday service with the Atheist Reformation. We will be back next week. We coming back at noon, or are you going to be out doing electioneering again?
Noon looks like it's probably a good time for next week. I don't know about anything because we had special elections that are happening Tuesday. So if you're in the Houston area, there is an election on Tuesday.
All right, then. There. And yeah, I may not be super openly political on this show, but I do believe that you need to vote. If you live in the Houston area and you give a damn about your local area, special elections on Tuesday, go vote.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
maybe we'll have on another day.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into the Atheist Reformation for the Sunday service. Everybody have a good night. And remember, homeopathy is bullshit.